Hello again. So in this video I'm going to go into the grandchild's trust, which is down here, and very simply it's similar to these joint settler discretionary lifetime trusts, with one essential difference, that the beneficiaries are different. So in these trusts and these single settler trusts, the trustees are my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. In the grandchild's trust, the beneficiaries are purely and simply my grandchildren and no one else. So this trust is set up specifically to make gifts to your grandchildren for maybe during lifetime, for education fees, university fees, that kind of thing, because it's very effective in that you can gift assets into it. Those assets grow tax-free, and effectively they were put in something like an offshore bond, and then when your grandchildren are old enough to need the money for their university education, for instance, then that money can be assigned to them, and effectively, if they're non-taxpayers, it can go out to them at 11,000 plus a year, which would be tax-free because they're non-taxpayers. So very tax efficient methodology of passing money on. It could grow tax-free within something like an offshore bond and then be passed out tax-free. So the offshore bond is held within the trust if that's required. But sometimes it's purely and simply that people want to gift money to their grandchildren on their deaths, but they want the money to be separated. So for instance, if their children, Richard and Jane, Jane has no children, and if they split the assets evenly between Richard and Jane, then the grandchildren would get eventually some of the money from Richard, presumably, whereas they may not get it from Jane, or they may, depending on what Jane decides. But here, the settlers, yourselves, the original people who put the money into the trust and who die leaving the assets, can decide, of course, to bypass the children and leave some money to the grandchildren directly, and it doesn't necessarily have to be for university fees, it can be for any reason at all, deposits down on homes, whatever they choose. But quite often grandparents like to leave money directly to their grandchildren, because really they're separate people from their children, and therefore why is it essential that it has to be split evenly amongst each of the children? So it's a different perspective. You leave some money to your grandchildren directly and you split all the remainder, the majority probably, between your children. Okay, so that's the grandchild's trust. Really, it's only worthwhile if a couple's going to leave probably in excess of £50,000. Otherwise, probably not worthwhile. The fee on that one is £760, which is slightly higher than the joint settler trust, because we have to change the beneficiaries of that trust. So again, a fair bit of extra paperwork to deal with that. Okay, so that's the grandchild's trust, and yeah, set up mainly to leave money separately entirely to the grandchildren during lifetime or on death.